On this episode of Ergo, I've got to ask the question, Donald Trump, are you sick of winning yet?
Because that's what recusal is to say that I'm voluntarily surrendering my authority to oversee these investigations. I believe that we are certainly making ground on the case that may, in my mind and in my hopes and in my prayers, will take down Donald Trump. And that is, the Republican Party has and is waging the second Civil War. With that said, I am taking the gloves off. I am done playing nice. I am done being tolerant of those who don't value me and all minorities as people.
Welcome back to Ergo, everybody. I'm your host, Brandon, here in Ohio. As always, happy to be here to talk politics with you on a Sunday. We're going to jump right into all of the breaking news that's been happening this past week, as it has been a very stressful and daunting week for everyone. To start off, we're going to give credit to the resistance again for their victory in healthcare. The week started off looking dark and kind of grim as Donald Trump had successfully threatened and scared enough Republicans in the Senate to vote yes on the motion to proceed on repealing and replacing Obamacare. And with that victory, he of course went to the media to grandstand, vis-a-vis brag about how great of a president he is and how much of a monumental win this was for his administration and for Republicans, even though it was just a motion to proceed to debate, not a motion to proceed to make it a law. But of course, he doesn't know the first thing about politics or civics. Anyways, someone who does, Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, immediately took to voting on the Better Care Reconciliation Bill, which was a bill that he and 12 other old white men crafted behind closed doors. They did not allow women, they did not allow Democrats, they held no hearings, no nothing. They brought that up to vote first, and it failed. Then, reaching in his bag of old tricks, Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell brought up an old bill that had passed before when President Barack Obama was in office, but they knew President Barack Obama would never sign it. At any rate, it was a bill that would repeal Obamacare entirely, delay that repeal for 2 years, giving the Republicans enough time to come up with something to replace it with. When they brought this up for a vote this time, it completely failed. Lastly, in their last-ditch effort to finally repeal and replace the disastrous Obamacare, which is something that the Republicans have campaigned on for 7 years now, they came desperate and came with a skinny repeal, also known as the Freedom Bill, as Donald Trump likes to call it. And all that skinny bill is it was going to it was going to repeal a lot of the major parts of Obamacare. When this came up to vote, it failed too. And this is why I say that myself and the resistance owes many thanks and a lot of gratitude to 3 Republican leaders who actually became profiles in courage, in my opinion, for their votes of no against this. And they are Republican Senator Susan Collins, whom had always stated that she wanted to work with the Democrats in a bipartisan fashion. The second Republican Senator, Lisa Murkowski, whom represents Alaska, the state that Donald Trump most recently threatened because she would not vote with him. And the last one is Republican Senator John McCain of Arizona, whom no one, more specifically me, never anticipated him to go against the rest of his Republican gang. But he did. And he stopped the repeal and replace of Obamacare, at least for now. So great job, resistance. We have to keep our eyes open because I'm sure they will attempt to do this again. Money means everything to them. Moving on to some other news. Donald Trump has picked a beef with someone that I've had a beef with since the beginning of this presidency, and that is he's picking up a beef with Attorney General Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III. So, Donald Trump had a meeting with the New York Times, the same New York Times that he calls the failing New York Times. He begged them for a meeting so that he could give an interview to them. And that interview was released on July 19th, 2017. And he is quoted for saying the following, quote, Jeff Sessions takes the job, gets into the job, recuses himself, which frankly I think is very unfair to the president, he added. How do you take a job and then recuse yourself? If he would have recused himself before the job, I would have said, thanks, Jeff, but I'm not going to take you. It's extremely unfair, and that's a mild word, to the president, end quote. To break that down for everybody, because I don't know if you're like me to where when I read that, I felt like my IQ dropped about 50 points because the sentence structure here is about a fifth grade sentence structure. What he is trying to say here is that before the election that Donald Trump won due to the Electoral College and not the popular vote, at any rate, the election that he won, he decided to make Attorney General Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III. So he appointed him to that position. Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III passed the Senate confirmation process, and he's officially now the Attorney General. Upon taking that position, and shortly after it, Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III had to recuse himself from overseeing the Russian investigation. That is to say that he had to voluntarily remove himself from being the leader of that investigation. And he had to do so because he was caught red-handed lying about his several contacts with Russian government officials. Therefore, his Deputy Attorney General or Assistant Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, had to pick up the ball and take the lead on the Russian investigation. However, when Donald Trump made yet another dumb move and fired James Comey, the then FBI director, that triggered the special prosecutor, Robert Mueller, to be appointed. So, I should note that Robert Mueller is a registered Republican. And if you analyze all of this very closely, and you don't really have to look that close, you can see that Trump's real issue isn't with Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III as an individual. It's with the fact that he had to recuse himself, which led to the appointing of the special prosecutor who's giving him a world of pain right now. And we're going to look more into why he wants Robert Mueller out of the picture after the break. Ergo wants to be the platform for you to discuss your political thoughts. Please feel free to join the discussion via phone, video, or in person. To set up an interview, contact the Ergo Show at Outlook.com. So, as I said in the last segment, Robert Mueller is a registered Republican. He even served as the FBI director under President George W. Bush. He's held several top government positions, and he has wide respect with Republicans and Democrats, and they even consider him to be untouchable. So why is this illegitimate president, Donald Trump, attempting to get rid of him, or in the very least, pick a beef with him? Well, I'm going to refer you to that same July 19th New York Times article that I was quoting in the last segment. The New York Times went on to report this, quote, Mr. Trump said Mr. Mueller was running an office rife with conflicts of interest and warned investigators against delving into matters far afield from Russia. Mr. Trump never said he would order the Justice Department to fire Mr. Mueller, nor would he outline circumstances under which he might do so, but he left open the possibility as he expressed deep grievance over an investigation that has taken a political toll in the 6 months since he took office. Asked if Mr. Mueller's investigation will cross a red line if it expanded to look at his family's finances beyond any relationship to Russia, Mr. Trump said, I would say yes. He would not say what he would do about it. I think that's a violation. Look, this is about Russia. End quote. So in other words, not only is Donald Trump attempting to control the who, what, where, when, why, and how investigators are in fact investigating him, it appears that they have found a soft spot, a troublesome or worrisome area for Donald Trump, and that is his finances. To add more to this argument, the Washington Post reports the following. They say, quote, some of Trump's lawyers are exploring ways to limit or undercut special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation, building a case against what they allege are his conflicts of interest and discussing the president's authority to grant pardons, end quote. It goes on to say, he has told aides he was especially disturbed after learning Mueller would be able to access several years of his tax returns, end quote. Yes, we are talking about the very same years of tax returns that Donald Trump lied and said he would release should he win the investigation. But, whatever. I would like to ask you all, is Donald Trump's behavior the behavior of someone you would consider to be a prudent, innocent American? But before you answer that question, I want to give you one more piece from the Washington Post. And they say, quote, Trump has discussed with confidants and advisors in recent days the possibility of installing a new attorney general through a recess appointment if Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III leaves the job, end quote. So, when thinking of your answer to the question of whether Donald Trump is acting as if he is a prudent, innocent American citizen, consider the following. He's upset that Mueller's going after his finances, so he's trying to find a way to get rid of Mueller. He's belittling and bullying Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III because he wants him to resign so he can appoint someone new to fire Mueller. He's considering pardoning people of any criminal activities. Certainly the behavior of someone I consider to be innocent and prudent. At any rate, I want to break down the whole recess appointment thing. The United States senators all go on a month-long recess vis-a-vis vacation for the month of August. As I said, every year they do this. So, the United States president, regardless of who it is, can make presidential cabinet appointments without having to go through the Senate confirmation process whenever the Senate is out for any time longer than 1 week. They are about to be gone for 1 whole month. The Attorney General position is a presidential cabinet position. So, you don't need glasses like I wear to see that Attorney General Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III has a big target on his back. Because if Trump can pick him off either by firing him or getting him to quit, Trump can then appoint one of his lackey lawyers to be the new Attorney General without Senate confirmation, without Senate scrutiny, without Senate investigation, and he can automatically take that position. And then Trump can order that new Attorney General to fire the special prosecutor Robert Mueller. And they would, of course, do it because Donald Trump is their master. However, the United States senators are smelling what I'm smelling, and they know this story, and they know what Donald Trump is up to. And this is some of their responses to any possibility of Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III leaving or getting rid of Mueller.
This effort to basically marginalize and humiliate the Attorney General is not going over well in the Senate. If Jeff Sessions is fired, there will be holy hell to pay. Any effort to go after Mueller could be the beginning of the end of the Trump presidency, unless Mueller did something wrong.
Are you concerned that the president is acting this way towards his attorney general because of Russia?
Of course. Let's analyze this. What the president's doing is brutal. How would you like to be working for a man who is trying to hound you publicly into resigning? What kind of loyalty does that inspire? And it's unprofessional. I agree with Lindsey Graham. For a president to be directing his attorney general to initiate a prosecution is unheard of, and to do it publicly is just unthinkable. And the real reason behind it, as one of your guests noted, it's all about trying to dissemble the Bob Mueller investigation, to try to stop this investigation into the Russian impact on our last presidential election and the Trump campaign. It's very obvious what he's trying to do, and the scenarios are unfolding. Get himself a new attorney general, take over the special investigation himself, take Mueller out of business, take the heat off the White House.
If that's the goal, Senator, and he does remove the Attorney General after you go out on a full recess, he might be able to appoint him without Senate confirmation during the recess. Do you want Mitch McConnell and the Senate to avoid going into a full recess for that reason?
Yes, if that's what it takes. I think it's that important. If we don't stand for the principle that no one in this country is above the law, then what are we? Is this a nation of laws? Is it a nation of justice? To think that the president or any person in the White House is above the law is unacceptable in America.
So how would you do that, Senator? I mean, that's pretty significant. If you're saying that you can't go into a full recess, to avoid a potential jamming in of an acting attorney general, how would you do that?
We're exploring the ways right now.
Would you try to filibuster the adjournment resolution, or can you give us any?
I think I've told you as much as I can tell you at this moment, but the idea that this president would use the August recess to stop the investigation of the Russian impact on the election and his campaign is unacceptable.
All right, very interesting.
All right, so that completes the news portion of the show, and after this break, I have an interview with the Ergo Show's international contributor, V, from the United Kingdom. It makes me very happy to actually say that I have a international contributor to the show. I kind of feel fancy, like I'm on MSNBC or something like that. So anyways, after the break, be sure to check out the interview.
Being offended doesn't work anymore. Throwing insults doesn't work anymore. The only thing that works is fucking bothering, doing something, and all you have to do is engage in the debate. Talk to people who think differently to you and persuade them of your argument. It's so easy, and the left have lost the art. Stop thinking that everyone who disagrees with you is evil, or racist, or sexist, or stupid, and talk to them. Persuade them otherwise, because if you don't, I'll tell you what you get. You get President Trump.
Okay, let's do this.
All right, so you know there's been a lot of news over here about the UK in addition to Donald Trump. Most interesting, comparing Donald Trump with Theresa May, his BFF. So her snap election backfired, in which she did not retain her majority with the Conservatives. So could you explain the election results and what this means for the British electorate?
Okay, well, basically, just to sort of give you a bit of background in terms of this snap election, for people that aren't aware, essentially, what we have here in the UK are fixed terms, just very similar to what you guys have got in the US, where every 4 years you've got your election. Here in the UK, the maximum parliamentary limit or maximum parliamentary term is for 5 years, right? But for those 5 years, the party leader has got the right to call an election at any time, okay? And that's what they call a snap election. And what had happened here in the UK before the election was called, the cynic in me believes that Theresa May had a look at her opinion polls. She saw that her approval rating was quite high, and from that point, it looked almost crazy for her to lose the election. So that would allow her to call an election in 2017, essentially, I think 3 years early, and then allow her to essentially be Prime Minister well after Brexit had gone through. And the way she sold it to the public is to say that she wanted to get a bigger majority, so she could go to Brussels and then essentially say to the people in Brussels that she has got a strong mandate from the British public to argue her case for a good Brexit deal, which is how she sold it to the public. But if you look closer, you realize that she was selling the British public a lemon, because to the EU, honestly, to the EU, it doesn't matter if she's got a majority of one, if she's got a majority of 180 seats, okay? Their position doesn't change, and it really doesn't matter to them what's happening in the UK. They just need to be able to discuss the Brexit deal with somebody, a functioning government, and it doesn't matter how many seats she's got, so she didn't really have to do that for the reason that she gave, all right? Mm-hmm. I think it's just really a case of, obviously I don't want to put words into my Prime Minister's mouth, but I think she was stung by the criticism that people kept on making, that she wasn't an elected Prime Minister. So because David Cameron was the elected Prime Minister. He resigned after the UK voted to leave the EU, and there was a leadership challenge. So that's how Theresa May became our Prime Minister, you know? Mm-hmm. So people kept on, our opposition leader, Jeremy Corbyn, kept on making the argument that she is not a elected Prime Minister and therefore doesn't really have the mandate to push through her vision for Brexit because that's not what the British public voted for. Fair enough. I mean, that's a fair point. But she was the Prime Minister, or she is the Prime Minister, and she could have just said, you know what, you can say what you like, okay? I'm the girl in power, all right? I just don't care.
Right.
But, you know, but she chose it. She went for it. So just to sort of like give you a bit of a background here, in the UK, we've got essentially 650 seats, okay? So there's 650, MPs dotted around all the different territories in the UK, so like in Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and England, the most important
part.
Yes, and I forget it. But yes, so there's 650 seats there, okay? So for you to be able to form a majority government, all right, and the importance of that is that if you are a government, you have to have a minimum of 326 seats, okay? Anything less than 326 seats is a minority government, all right? And you can't function on a minority government because the theory is, okay, just like, you know, just very in a nutshell, the theory is if you were to introduce a law and you've got less than the majority of seats in the government, there's no guarantee that you can actually pass the law because you don't on paper have the votes, all right? So, I mean, obviously, you know, that's just like, I mean, even if you have got the number of theoretical seats, it's not guaranteed that you can pass the law because, you know, some of your MPs may decide to rebel against the government, you know. So, for example, I don't know if there's a law that deals with, I don't know, fishing or environmental aspects, if you will, or environmental concerns. It may be appropriate for certain MPs who have got seats which are essentially by the coast, if you will, and other constituencies which are landlocked. They may not care. Okay, and you know, it's just, there's always a give and take there, right? Just because you have got the seats does not guarantee that you will get the law passed. But if you've got less than 326 seats, okay, you're a minority government, and it's just not going to happen. All right. So if you are a minority government, that's something that Theresa May just narrowly avoided. Okay, what could have happened is that there could have been a vote of no confidence into her government, and for that to happen, and it's something that can actually still happen now. You just really need a simple majority vote. Okay, so 326 MPs have to say we've got no confidence in our government. We have to call another general election.
Wow.
You know, just after we've called this one now. So, and that's something that we're sort of like living with right now. So in the event, okay, Theresa May went from what you would call a very slender majority. She had 330 seats before she went and called a snap election. And, you know, for the longest time, it looked like she was going to actually get more seats, all right? And she was going to essentially wipe out the opposition party. I say wipe out, but she was going to reduce their standings, their seats, humongously, because Jeremy Corbyn, he, how can I say, he is... I mean, I've got to say, I'm not a huge fan of Jeremy Corbyn myself, okay? But he's not a very... I want to say popular is not the right thing because he is popular as the votes were borne out, but our media doesn't like him. Right. But something you've also always got to remember is who is in charge of the media, okay? And you've got Rupert Murdoch, who runs essentially virtually the entire UK media. He's got 2 or 3 of our best-selling newspapers, and there's another guy that owns the Daily Mail. And these guys here, they're essentially billionaires who don't live in the country, but they do have a huge say in how politics are shaped here in the UK, and their policies they have basically fostered this sense of anti-immigrant feeling that we've got here in the UK. So you just can't sort of like go a week or even 3 days without seeing a headline, oh, these immigrants, they come over here, they create crime, they rob, they rape, they do this, that, and whatever else. And Jeremy Corbyn, he has got a completely different ideology, so he doesn't quite subscribe to this, and he's not led by what the newspapers say.
Right.
So basically, Theresa May, she had 330 seats. She then basically dropped to 317.
Gosh.
All right. So as I said before, you've got your majority government has to have a minimum of 326 seats. Okay. Mm-hmm. So she had her majority government. She called a snap election. Everybody suggested everything before the election suggested she was going to get much, much more. And then we had the exit polls. Just right after the cutoff for the votes had been. So they had like an exit poll that sort of gives you a projection. It's not a perfect projection, but it gives you an idea of exactly what the end result is going to be. And when this exit poll happened, I was still awake. I think this is about 10 p.m. on June the 8th, when we had our election day. I was about to sort of like honestly pour myself a large sniff of whiskey because oh god, another 5 years of Tory rule, I just can't cope, And then the exit poll came by, and I've got to say it was just like the happiest exit poll I've ever seen. So it suggested that she was going to lose her majority. Okay, it even suggested that it might even bring us a Labour government if they were to form a coalition government with somebody else. Which is not quite perfect, but there you go. So, and that's exactly how it then came to pass. So she lost her majority. She's now got 317 seats, and she. In normal times, that sort of defeat, this is quite bruising stuff there because she's now put herself in a really, really terrible place because, she's lost a majority, and that's so vital to have a functioning government. And under normal circumstances, that would have been a cause for her to actually resign, okay? But we are living in strange times, okay? Right. So, she held on to power. So, what has happened now is that she has now decided to form a coalition government with the DUP, a Northern Irish party.
Right. I was getting ready to ask you that. Do you think that her minority government tagged up with this other party, do you think that that'll be successful over there with you guys?
Well, I mean, you see, success comes in very many different forms. I mean, she has got the numbers now in terms of her final seats, which she controls. So she has gained an understanding with the DUP that they will support her in certain aspects, okay? Mm-hmm. But this support seemingly has come at a huge price. So it's now been reported that in order for her to secure the support of the DUP has secured £1 billion.
God.
Okay, which is going to be funneled to the DUP to help with infrastructure, schools, health, all these sorts of things. Okay, and it's just like let me see. I think they got 12 or 10 MPs, and if you sort of like count that down, for every single seat that she's got, she paid 100 million quid. Essentially.
My gosh.
Yeah, but that's just me being very, very cynical. But the downside to this whole thing is like the DUP, and I have to be honest with you, I just didn't really give the DUP very much thought before this snap election, just for the fact that, for one thing, they are so small, so tiny. They're really only in Northern Ireland, and for another, that I'm very ignorant of the problems that we've got here in Ireland and Northern Ireland, all right? So I'm unfortunately not an expert when it comes to the IRA and the Good Friday Agreement and all these sorts of things, which just essentially just caused so much strife in the United Kingdom as a whole for many, many years. But the thing is that the DUP, they've had to sort of, our Good Friday Agreement is what was created to bring about a ceasefire with the IRA. All right. So the IRA, they were the Irish Republican Army, and they had basically been wanting to bring out peace between, what shall we say, protect. I can't even really summarize it properly. It's such a complex thing, okay? But let's just say this: the Good Friday Agreement is something, a momentous piece of legislation there, or an agreement which has brought about peace after about decades of strife between Ireland and Northern Ireland. And now that the DUP is in charge, shall we say, the direct opposition to that, the Sinn Féin party in Ireland, they are not happy, okay? And there is an argument to be made that the Good Friday Agreement could be in peril because of this, and God only knows what that will mean in the future. Right. But in terms of, like, if we, and apologies to any Irish or Northern Irish people who are listening in here, this is a topic that really needs an expert, okay, way above my thinking here, all right? I'm very sorry, I am just not that man. But if we just sort of like concentrate on what the DUP means for the United Kingdom here, they are a country, or shall we say a party that is about as backwards as you can think in terms of a political party, okay? They are, I think it's probably not unfair to say, if you take the worst excesses of the most right-wing GOP members, okay, the DUP goes a step beyond that, all right? Mm-hmm. These guys here believe in creationism. So they are part of, like, I think what they call the Caleb Foundation, and basically what that means is that they believe that the world is 10,000 years old. Okay, wow. They want this creationism to be taught in schools, and I mean, obviously, you know, when you sort of start to think about what does creationism mean, all right, so you can forget all about evolution. Okay, these guys here, they believe or take the Bible, especially the book of Genesis, as gospel, okay? Mm-hmm. God himself created the world in 6 days, and they take it absolutely literal. They are against same-sex marriage.
Of course.
Of course, you know, they have basically got virtually absolutely no time at all whatsoever for LGBTQI rights, all right? Which brings up another interesting wrinkle, because we have got here in the UK, we've got the Conservative Party, and in Scotland we've got a Scottish offshoot of the Conservative Party called the Scottish Conservatives. And the Scottish Conservatives leader, she herself, is married to a woman.
Oh,
yes, you know, and it's just like it's really quite interesting to sort of like see now that the Scottish Conservatives and the Conservatives are essentially in bed with the DUP, a party who just do not accept or recognize same-sex marriages. It just makes future, shall we say, votes in certain directions very, very tricky, and future discussions very, very tricky as well. I mean, can you imagine having to sit next to the DUP leader as a woman who's married to another woman and listening to her talk about how same-sex marriages are against the word of God? It's just it's going to be interesting stuff.
It's very antiquated. Just when I thought the Republican Party here in the United States was antiquated, clearly there's way worse, apparently.
Definitely is. It just really does sort of like seem as if the DUP has modelled itself after the worst instincts of the GOP, and it's just gone so far beyond them. It's just absolutely unbelievable. I mean, because of the DUP supports no abortion for any reason. Okay, I think the only time when they allow an abortion is when there is a danger to the life of the mother. Okay, and even that was
So
just
not even for rape? Not even for rape?
oh no,
Oh,
Ra-
wow.
rape, incest. You better learn to love the father. No, it's just like
Wow, I don't mean to laugh. That's just really disgusting. Like,
it is terrible. I mean, I've got here like an instance that I remember. I think this was in 2015, and what had happened is that there was a dentist who she had she was miscarrying essentially. Okay, and she was basically she went to the hospital because she was suffering from back pain and everything else, and the doctors had basically told her that she should wait and see. What had happened is that she had what they call a maternal infection, and it became very, very clear that the baby just wouldn't survive the pregnancy. Okay, and as I understand it, international best practice suggests that if you are in this situation where you've got a maternal infection and you are then diagnosed with sepsis, and this is exactly what happened to her, you should abort. But they refuse because abortion, as I said, is against law in Ireland. All right. So as long as there's a fetal heartbeat, they will not abort.
wow.
So and that's what was the case. So in the end, the fetus did die. But at that stage, it was just too late. I'm sorry, I'm just not a doctor, but I think it's fair to say that the fetus essentially, it was a septic miscarriage, and the mother died as well.
Wow.
And this is who we have now basically formed the coalition government with, right? And like I said, Northern Ireland is the only part of the UK, all right, where that happens. Ireland, Wales, Scotland, England, we are, in some ways backwards, but at least in that respect, okay, we're not that bad. But and these are the guys that we're with. So it's very interesting to sort of like see what the future will bring, because I mean, she may have the votes now for majority government, but if there is going to be a topic or there's a stumbling block where the DUP basically is not happy and refuses to vote with the government, that could allow Jeremy Corbyn, our opposition leader, to call a vote of no confidence, where we'd have to have another general election. Or what else can happen? It could just it's just wait and see essentially. No, if there's going to be, the only thing I can sort of see happening in the future where we could have another general election is if there's going to be a vote of no confidence, and for that to happen, I think you just have to have a simple majority, and we'll have to wait and see what happens now.
All right. Well, speaking in terms of ideology and whatnot, I know Bernie Sanders is a favorite. He loves the Labor Party. I don't know much about them. So what do they stand for, and why do you think they were able to gain so many seats in the election?
Well, in terms of what they stand for, traditionally they were the party of the working folk, so to speak. Okay, so sorry, when I say the working, I mean everybody works. What I mean to say is, shall we say, the working class people.
Like
that's
the middle class and lower class.
And that's it. So that's essentially what their base was. That's who they championed for. But now, because Brexit is such an all-encompassing topic, which is essentially the most important topic for us here in the UK, they are also for Brexit. So there isn't.
Wow.
Yes. So there isn't really, in the most important part of it, there isn't really very much core between those two. But something else that is quite an important distinguishing mark between our two parties, the Conservatives and the Labour Party, is that the Labour Party is anti-austerity. So what I mean by that is that after the last economic crash that we had here, the Conservative government enforced austerity. So it basically cut a whole bunch of our public services right to the bone. Okay, so this would essentially be, less money for schools and infrastructure, and I guess most importantly for the police, which is also sort of like had an impact on our election right here. Something else that, sorry, I'm jumping from topic to topic, but this ties in quite nicely to why Theresa May happened to lose so much as well, so many seats. She was our Home Secretary in 2010, and as a Home Secretary, you've got ministerial oversight over our police, okay, in terms of recruitment and budget and all these sorts of things, right? And because of this economic downturn, and we introduced austerity, and there were obviously cuts which went through virtually everything that you need to make a a society function. There were also cuts to our police budget, which affected staffing levels. Okay, so in 2010, when Theresa May was the Home Secretary, she approved an 18% police budget cut. All right. Which meant that there was a peak of, hold on, I've got it written down here, 140, yeah, I'm prepared, 144,353 policemen were employed in 2009, and that dropped to 122,859 in 2016. Now, the thing is, it's like, as you can imagine, anytime there's a cut, there'll be people whose livelihoods depends on, so there'll be, police chiefs and commissioners who are saying, well, hold on, you can't do this, okay? What that would mean is that there'll be a crime free for all and stuff, and people, crime will go up if policemen go down, which didn't quite happen, all right? So, we lost policemen, but our crime didn't spike as badly as people had suggested, and you'd have to get a criminologist to sort of like go through why that is. But I believe there's been a trend or change in the types of crimes that we have. All right. So whereas beforehand, people, I don't know what sort of things they do, but certain crimes that we've got now, like digital crimes, harassment online, or what's called fraud, a bank fraud or internet fraud, that sort of stuff, or identity theft. That's the sort of stuff which policemen, which you sort of patrol the streets, wouldn't necessarily catch, So that's why there wasn't a sort of like corresponding spike in crime. And this is a very, very basic observation. I'm no criminologist, like I said, but I think certain crimes, they just aren't sort of like caught by the types of police that were cut. The counterterrorism force, for example, the counterterrorism budget, that stayed the same. So there wasn't a reduction in the people that deal with counterterrorism. But what there was a huge reduction of was community policing intelligence, okay? And I think this is something that really, really hurt Theresa May in the run-up to the election, because when it comes to community policing, okay, these are the guys who will identify and assess the risk posed by people who are known to the police. So if you sort of like think of the different terror attacks that we've had here in the UK this year, I think without exception, these guys were known to the police, okay? And it's this community policing intelligence officers who would then basically take that a step further. It's like, if they're known to the police, fair enough. The community policing intelligence officers, they then dig deeper and further. Where have they been? Do they know certain terrorists? That sort of thing. Are they likely to produce or make an attack? I mean, it's not to say that they are 100% accurate or that they may have stopped it. I mean, I don't want to say that, but let's just say this: certain work that could have been done by these guys wasn't done. All right. And excuse me. And some very, very prominent policemen in the run-up to the election were saying that cuts have consequences, and that is then something that was then tied to Theresa May and everything that we've seen here so far, because suddenly you had you had this attack in Manchester that was I think on May the 22nd at the Ariana Grande concert. The the suicide bomber, he was known by the police. And then in March, you had this attack on the Westminster Bridge in London. Again, this is another guy that was known to the police. And the certain police officers were then able to make that connection between the reduction in a police budget and the reaction in police numbers, who would have ordinarily been able to do more investigation into these persons of interest, I guess you'd call them. And this didn't happen. And that then made... excuse me, sorry, I'm just going to have a quick cough here.
No problem.
Sorry about that. And they were able to make that connection there, and that's then something that then was a negative point for Theresa May, because she had championed herself as a strong and stable government. But then, of course, decisions that she'd made in the past came back to haunt her, and that is something that then put off quite a lot of voters. On top of all of that, it was also very difficult to actually get a sense of what exactly she stands for, because I know I keep circling back to Brexit, but as I said, it's the most important thing on our political landscape, and she has not been able to give us a very definite idea of what exactly it is that she wants Brexit to accomplish, you know? I think there's a very famous quote that we've had here in the UK, which we've been crying about since she said it. So a journalist asked us, so what does Brexit mean for you? Expecting to get a detailed answer in terms of will we be able to sell our goods and services to the UK without further penalties? Will we be able to travel back and forth without having to apply for a visa? Will we be able to share intelligence with the Europol organization? Will we be able to import medicine? All these sorts of things which we can do right now without any penalties. Will we be able to have the same sort of situation in the future? And instead of getting a detailed answer back, all we heard was Brexit means Brexit. Okay?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So you can imagine you've got sort of like a really, really educated journalist, formulating a very, very detailed question, expecting to get an answer which he can put into his newspaper so that his readers can be, can have a bit of confidence into the process, because it is a scary thing going into a negotiation without knowing what exactly it is that you're trying to achieve. And what comes back? Brexit means Brexit, you know? Even my 4-year-old wouldn't be happy with that answer. But there you go.
Well, you know, she, that was definitely very well articulated. On January 20th, 2017, Donald Trump was unfortunately inaugurated. By January 30th, 2017, Sally Yates, whom was serving as acting Attorney General, was fired for refusing to defend Trump's illegal travel ban. On February 13, 2017, National Security Advisor Michael Flynn resigned due to lying about his contacts with Russian government officials. March 10, 2017 comes around and Donald Trump orders Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III to fire 46 United States attorneys, including Preet Bharara, whom was promised by Trump he'd get to keep his job. Fast forwarding to May 9, 2017, the FBI Director Jim Comey is fired by Donald Trump. May 30th, 2017, Mike Dubke, who was the White House Communications Director, resigned. July 6th, the Director of the Office of Government Ethics, Walter Schaub, resigned. July 20th, 2017, Mark Corallo, the spokesman for Trump's legal team, resigned. And on July 21st, 2017, the one and only Sean Spicer, the lying press secretary, resigned. Furthermore, repealing and replacing Obamacare wasn't the only big news of the week. The House of Representatives and the United States Senate passed new sanctions on Russia. These new sanctions add congressional review, which will prevent Donald Trump from ever lifting sanctions on Russia like he's hinting at doing it. Congress must approve of that first. Donald Trump must either sign these new sanctions into law or attempt to veto them. But even if he does attempt to veto them, the vote in the Senate was 98 yeses and 2 noes, which means that the Senate does have the votes and will override Trump's veto. Donald Trump, the loser in chief. Until next week, this is your episode of Ergo, before you, the people.
I'm pulling my weight.